It started as nothing, just a moment of idle curiosity, the kind that makes you Google your own name at 2 a.m. just to see what's out there. Except I wasn't searching for myself. Evelyn was in the bathroom, the sound of water sloshing in the tub, a distant murmur behind me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed it. Evelyn Hathaway. A simple, harmless act, driven by boredom. But the moment I hit enter, the world shifted. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean I felt it, like reality itself had tilted just slightly, an imperceptible yet undeniable lurch in the fabric of the universe. The search results loaded, and my heart stuttered as my eyes landed on a headline that could not exist. Evelyn Carter, 28, killed in tragic accident. Services held this Sunday. I blinked, my pulse hammering in my throat as I stared at the words, hoping, praying I had misread them. But there it was, clear as day, an obituary, dated 8 years ago. The same year we met. The same day. My hands felt numb as I clicked the link, my breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. A car crash, it said. A drunk driver on Highway 16. Immediate fatality. The article listed the details of her funeral, the cemetery where she was buried, a grave that, according to this, had been sitting there for almost a decade. My vision blurred as the screen swam before me, the words twisting into something unreal, something impossible. My wife was alive. She was alive. I had kissed her just this morning, had touched her skin, felt the warmth of her body against mine. She was real. She had to be. But then, why was I reading about her death? The bathroom door creaked open behind me, and a wave of cold air ghosted over the back of my neck. I hadn't heard her get out of the tub. My fingers trembled on the mouse as my breath hitched in my throat, every nerve in my body screaming at me to close the page, to pretend I had never seen it. But it was too late. A shadow stretched across the floor, long and distorted in the dim glow of my monitor. My spine locked as a voice, her voice, whispered from behind me, soft and too close. What are you looking at? The moment I heard the faint creak of the floorboard behind me, my body went rigid. I slammed the laptop shut, swallowing the sick jolt of panic rising in my throat, and turned toward the doorway with what I hoped was a natural, easy smile. Too late. She saw. Evelyn stood there, motionless, her rain-soaked hair plastered against her cheeks, water dripping from the hem of her dress onto the hardwood floor. The dim glow from the hallway lamp stretched her shadow unnaturally long behind her, distorting her shape. She was watching me too closely, not like a wife catching her husband doing something suspicious, but like a predator assessing prey. What are you looking at? Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something cold, something deliberate. Just work, I muttered, waving a hand vaguely toward the laptop as if it didn't contain the thing that had just shattered my entire reality. The obituary. The old article with the grainy black and white photo. The words Evelyn Carter, 28, tragically killed in a car accident 8 years ago. The same face. The same eyes. The same woman standing in my doorway, dripping with rain, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. My pulse thundered in my ears as she stepped forward, the wet fabric of her dress clinging to her skin. I forced myself to stay still, to hold her gaze, to pretend nothing had changed. Because if she wasn't Evelyn, if she was something else, then I couldn't let her know that I knew. That night I checked on her. Random questions, set in the dark as we lay side by side. What was the name of your first pet? She hesitated, just for a split second, and whispered, Milo. You remember Milo, don't you? I knew his name was Milo from the story of the girl in the obituary. What street did you grow up on? Another pause, a little too long. On Maple Drive. Every answer matched the biography in the article, down to the smallest detail. Every memory, every place, every milestone, perfectly matched the life of a woman who had been dead for almost a decade. My chest tightened with something colder than fear. It wasn't just that she was lying. She knew exactly what to say to convince me that she was real. It started small. Almost too small to notice. One morning, I made coffee, set my mug down on the kitchen counter, and turned away for just a moment, maybe 5 seconds at most, to grab my phone. When I turned back, the mug was gone. I frowned, scanning the counter, the sink, the table. Nothing. Then I saw it. Sitting on the shelf above the fridge, balanced so precariously it looked like a single breath would send it crashing to the floor. I hadn't put it there. I couldn't have. A chill prickled at the back of my neck, but I forced myself to stay rational. Maybe I had placed it absent-mindedly. Maybe I was just tired. But as the days passed, the incidents piled up. Doors I knew I'd closed would be open when I turned back around. My keys vanished from my nightstand. only to reappear inside a kitchen cabinet. The TV turned itself on in the middle of the night, stuck on static. Every time I tried to dismiss it, my mind whispered the same thing over and over. It's her. The whispers started 3 nights later. A faint, rustling murmur, just on the edge of hearing, coming from inside our bedroom closet. The first time, I sat up in bed, heart hammering, and strained to listen. The sound was so quiet it almost didn't seem real, like a trick of my imagination. But then Evelyn stirred beside me, shifting under the covers, and the whispering stopped instantly. I told myself it was nothing. The house settling. Pipes. The wind. But the next night, it happened again. Louder this time, urgent and insistent, a jumble of words I couldn't quite make out. My stomach twisted into knots as I stared at the closed closet door. Something was inside. Watching. Listening. Waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. That night, after Evelyn had fallen asleep, I set up a small camera on my nightstand, angled toward the bed. I just needed proof. A reason. Something to make sense of all of this. The next morning, I checked the footage. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. At exactly 3:13 a.m., Evelyn sat up in bed. She didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't even blink. For 3 hours straight, she just sat there, perfectly still, staring at me. I scrubbed through the video, hoping, praying for some sign that she had simply been awake, thinking, restless. But she wasn't just sitting. She was watching. Her head slightly tilted, her lips barely parted, her breath slow and even. And then, at 6:13 a.m., she lay back down, closed her eyes, and curled into me like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just spent the entire night watching me sleep. After watching that video, after seeing Evelyn stare at me with dead, glassy eyes for 3 hours straight, something inside me shifted. I stopped sleeping through the night. I stopped making excuses. I stopped pretending I didn't feel like I was living with a stranger. Or something worse. While she made breakfast, hummed in the shower, smiled in all the right places, I dug. I started small, hoping for something harmless, something that would make me feel ridiculous for ever doubting her. I searched for her name, her school, her hometown. Nothing. No childhood photos, no family members, no digital footprint at all before the year we met. It was like she didn't exist before that. I even called the old bakery she said she worked at in college. The number was disconnected. I went to the address. It was just an empty lot behind a chain-link fence, weeds growing through the cracks in the concrete. The deeper I looked, the darker it got. Her social media had only a few years of history, and even those felt staged. Perfect lighting. Perfect angles. But the more I stared, the more wrong it looked. There was one photo of her by a fountain at sunset, smiling, relaxed, almost too perfect. But there was no shadow behind her. Just light. Another showed her on a beach, toes buried in the sand, hair blowing in the wind, except her hair didn't move in the breeze like the palm trees behind her. It hung unnaturally still. In another one, taken at a party, she stood in the corner of the frame, smiling at the camera, but everyone else in the picture was blurry, like she was the only thing in focus. I kept scrolling, heart racing, palms sweaty. There was something wrong with her reflection too. In every mirror, her face looked off. Just a little. Tilted too far, smiling too wide, eyes looking slightly past where the camera was aimed. Like she knew she was being watched. Like she was watching back. Lately, I can feel her eyes on me. Always. Even when she's not in the room. Especially when she is. She started standing in doorways. Just standing. Watching. Not saying anything. Sometimes for 10 minutes. Sometimes for longer. And last night, while I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the soft creak of the floorboards outside our bedroom, I felt her crawl into bed behind me. Her breath on my neck was steady and cold. Not warm. Cold. Then she leaned in so close, her lips brushed my ear, and she whispered, "You've been different lately. Are you hiding something from me?" I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just closed my eyes and prayed she would fall asleep first. But she didn't. She stayed awake. Watching. It started with the breathing. I know how that sounds. I really do. But I swear to you, the house was breathing. At first, I thought it was just the old pipes groaning at night, or maybe the way the wind funneled through the attic vents. But no, it was rhythmic, wet, and slow, like lungs exhaling behind the drywall. When I walked down the hallway after midnight, the wallpaper seemed to pulse beneath my fingertips, like it had a heartbeat. The corners of rooms no longer behaved like shadows. They moved when I wasn't looking, spreading like oil. I tested it once. I stared directly at the darkest corner of our living room and refused to blink. But even then, just at the edge of my vision, I could feel something stretching, reaching, waiting. Evelyn didn't comment on it. She didn't flinch when the floorboards whispered or the ceiling creaked like it was alive. She just smiled that too wide smile and tilted her head, as if to say, "What's wrong, Nathan? Don't you like her home?" The real breaking point came when I found the fire. I was walking past the living room when I smelled smoke, not the kind from a candle or a burnt meal, but the acrid, sharp scent of burning paper and ink. I turned the corner and saw the fireplace roaring to life, orange flames licking upward. Something was inside. I rushed forward and grabbed the fire poker, jabbing at the pages curling into black. That's when I saw my name, my handwriting, pages torn from my private journal, the one I kept hidden behind a false panel in my office drawer. Pages about Evelyn. About the cameras. About the footage I never told her I watched. She knew. She must have found it. And now she was destroying the evidence. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't put the fire out. I just stood there as the last entry, "I think she knows that I know," crumbled to ash. I didn't go looking for her history, it found me. I was sorting through a box of old books in the attic, ones left behind by the previous owner, when a brittle newspaper clipping fell from between the pages of a rotted leather-bound Bible. The paper was yellowed, the edges brittle like dried leaves, but the headline was still legible: "Blackwood which burned alive. Final curse cast with her dying breath." I didn't breathe for a moment. The name struck something deep, like a piano string pulled taut, and snapped inside my chest. I unfolded the article slowly, half expecting it to disintegrate, and there she was, Evelyn Blackwood, dated 1874, accused of witchcraft, ritual sacrifice, and something the ink had smeared beyond recognition. But it wasn't the text that turned my stomach. It was the portrait beside it, drawn in charcoal, weathered with time, but unmistakably her. My wife. The same high cheekbones, the same serpentine eyes. The resemblance wasn't just uncanny, it was exact. I kept reading. She'd been accused of seducing men, of harvesting them for dark rituals tied to ancient fertility rites. Locals swore her unborn child continued to move after the flames had turned her body to cinders. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the house, not because of the whispers, which, by then, had begun to say my name. It was because I'd opened something, some door inside my mind I hadn't known was locked. I started researching resurrection cults, demonic pregnancies, the transference of souls across generations. It felt insane at first. Every site I visited was buried deep in the web, always prefaced with warnings: "Do not proceed unless you're ready to know the truth." But I couldn't stop. Not after what I'd seen. Over and over again, the same symbols showed up: a serpent curled around an infant, an inverted womb, a black sun. And in every old photo or sketch depiction of cult leaders, midwives, and witches throughout history, there she was, the same face, staring back at me across centuries, always smiling, always watching. I confronted Evelyn about the article, but she didn't even flinch. She just leaned in close, eyes wide and warm, and whispered, "Some love lasts longer than death." The whispers in the house grew bolder after that. They weren't just sounds anymore. They were conversations, arguments, laughter that echoed without a source. I started hearing them in the shower drain, in the clinking of the silverware drawer, behind the walls at night when I was trying not to cry. One night, as I passed the mirror in the upstairs hall, I caught a glimpse of Evelyn standing behind me, except it wasn't her reflection. It was that same charcoal-skinned, ash-eyed version from the old drawing, her hands resting gently on my shoulders. When I turned, she wasn't there. I locked the bathroom door that night and slept on the floor, clutching the article like it could save me. But the worst part wasn't the voices or the visions, it was the moment I realized I wasn't alone in the house, even when Evelyn was gone. Something else lives here now, and it's waking up. I woke up choking on the taste of something foul: damp earth, rotting wood, the coppery sting of blood in the air. The room was different. The air felt denser, as if I had woken up at the bottom of the ocean, the weight of something unseen pressing against my chest. My fingers dug into the mattress, my heart already hammering before I could even process why. Then I saw it. A crib. It stood at the foot of the bed, rocking ever so slightly, its antique frame cracked with age, the wood darkened with what looked like old, dried stains. I knew it hadn't been there when I fell asleep. My breath hitched as I sat up, my hands gripping the sheets so tightly my knuckles went white. Something inside the crib moved. A slow, deliberate shift beneath the heavy bundle of lace-wrapped cloth. My stomach twisted as I forced myself forward, my bare feet hitting the cold floorboards. The whispers, those damned, ever-present whispers, grew louder, curling against my ears like breath from unseen mouths. They were coming from inside the crib. With trembling fingers, I reached down and pulled the fabric away. Bones. Small, brittle, yellowed with age, tangled in the delicate remnants of something that might have once been a christening gown. The ribcage was mostly intact, curled inward, as if whatever had been inside it had died in pain. But the worst part, the part that made my knees buckle and my vision blur, was the skull. It was tiny, no bigger than the palm of my hand, and the moment my eyes locked onto its hollow sockets, the whispers turned into screams. I stumbled back, knocking over the nightstand, sending a glass shattering across the floor. The room seemed to pulse around me, shadows stretching, the walls shuddering like something inside them was alive. The air itself thickened, charged with static, and the crib rocked harder now, as if something unseen was soothing whatever lay within. I spun toward Evelyn, gasping her name, but she was already awake, sitting up against the headboard, watching me with that infuriatingly calm expression. I pointed a shaking finger at the crib, my voice raw, strangled. "What the hell is this?" Evelyn didn't look at it. She only tilted her head, her lips curling into a smile that made my stomach turn to ice. "It's almost time." The words slithered through the air like something living, something waiting. I felt it then, a shift in the room, a presence pressing closer, watching, breathing. The crib creaked, the bundle shifting once more, and this time, I heard it, a wet, rattling breath from inside the bones. Something had just woken up. I couldn't sleep. Not after what I had seen. Not after the crib, the bones, the way Evelyn had smiled, like she knew something I wasn't meant to understand. Every breath in the house felt thick, as if the air itself had weight, pressing down on me, seeping into my skin. My hands were still shaking as I unlocked my phone, my mind racing with paranoia, dread, and something darker, a sick, twisting need to know the truth. I had to find proof. I had to capture whatever was happening in this house, in this nightmare of a marriage. So, I set my phone on the dresser, the camera aimed at the crib, and I left it recording. Hours passed in suffocating silence, the only sound the occasional creak of the floorboards, the faintest whispers slithering through the walls. Then, at 3:12 a.m., Evelyn sat up. Slowly, methodically, she turned toward the crib and began to speak, not in English, not in Spanish, not in any language I had ever heard. The words scraped against my mind, sharp and guttural, wrong in a way that made my stomach lurch. They carried something beneath them, something old, something cold, something that should have stayed buried. I pressed my back against the wall, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears as I watched her speak to something that wasn't there. But I was wrong. Something was there. The air around the crib rippled, distorting, warping like heat waves rising from asphalt, except this wasn't heat, it was absence, a black, crawling nothingness. My breath hitched as the crib began to move, rocking ever so slightly at first, then more violently, the ancient wood groaning under the force of whatever lay within. My stomach twisted as a sound rose from inside, not a baby's cry, not an animal's whimper, but something else. Wet, hollow, hungry. I forced myself to move, inching toward my phone, my fingers slick with sweat as I reached for it. But the moment my hand closed around the device, Evelyn's voice stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Heavy. Watching. Waiting. I swallowed hard and lifted the phone, my thumb trembling as I stopped the recording. I had proof. I had something real. I just had to get out. I just had to run. But then Evelyn turned. She was looking right at me. My entire body went cold. I hadn't made a sound. I hadn't moved. But she knew. She had always known. The air around her seemed to shiver, distorting like a mirage, her features flickering in the dim light, too smooth, too perfect, too unreal. The thing in the crib shifted again, its breathing growing louder, wet and labored, something trying to take its first breath in centuries. And then Evelyn smiled, a slow, knowing curl of her lips as she whispered, "You were never supposed to know." The whispers in the walls turned to laughter. The crib stopped rocking. Something inside it moved. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't just coming. It was already here. I didn't think. I just ran. I tore out of the bedroom, barefoot, heart hammering, lungs already burning as I pounded down the hallway. The lights overhead flickered wildly, casting long, twitching shadows that danced along the walls like they were alive, like they were trying to reach for me. I don't remember screaming, but my throat felt raw, torn by the panic clawing its way out of my chest. The front door was ahead. So close. I lunged for it, yanking the handle with both hands, locked. I fumbled with the deadbolt, shaking, sweating, begging whatever God still listened to just let me out. But the bolt wouldn't move. The wood beneath my fingers began to pulse, growing warm, then hot, then burning. I cried out and stumbled back, staring in horror as the door bled. Dark, oozing blood poured from the grain, thick and slow like molasses. It dripped down in long trails, spelling something, some symbol that throbbed like a heartbeat. I turned and sprinted for the back instead, my feet slipping on the slick wood, the walls moaning softly, as if the house was alive and waking up, and it didn't want me to leave. I reached into my pocket, desperate, pulled out my phone. Maybe I could call someone. Maybe I could show them the video, prove I wasn't insane. But the moment my fingers touched the screen, it sparked. I froze. A low hiss erupted from the speaker, and the phone grew hot, scorching. I screamed as the plastic softened, bubbled, and then melted like wax in my palm, dripping between my fingers, scalding my skin. I dropped it with a cry, shaking the molten plastic from my hand, watching it sizzle on the floor like it was alive. The screen flickered one last time. Evelyn's face appeared, stretched into something wrong, something grinning. Then it hissed, cracked, and went black. That's when I heard her. Her voice, inside the walls. Inside my head. It wasn't coming from a room. It was coming from everywhere. You're mine now, Nathan. I backed away slowly, chest heaving, heart thudding like a war drum. The air grew colder. The lights blinked out one by one, leaving me in a silence so complete it pressed against my eardrums like pressure underwater. Then, the whispers returned. So many voices, and they were all chanting my name. Nathan, 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 over and over, like a lullaby twisted into a curse. The walls around me began to warp and stretch, the wood grains spiraling into eyes. Hundreds of eyes, watching me, blinking, twitching. I bolted up the stairs, heart splintering with terror, because I knew what this meant. The house wasn't haunted. It was possessed. And worse, I wasn't just trapped inside it. I was part of it now. I don't remember how I escaped the house. One minute I was trapped, walls alive, whispers in my head, Evelyn screaming my name. And the next, I was running barefoot through the trees, covered in blood that wasn't all mine, the cold night air tearing at my skin like claws. My mind was fractured, barely stitched together, and I don't even know if I screamed or cried or just disappeared into the dark. What I do remember is the road. Miles and miles of empty asphalt under the headlights of a stolen car, the steering wheel slick with blood, my hands trembling so hard I could barely hold it straight. I drove until the sky turned gray, then blue, then black again, never stopping, never daring to look in the rearview mirror, because I knew, somehow I just knew, that if I looked back, the house would be there. Watching, waiting, breathing. I vanished. I scrubbed myself from the grid, ditched the car, changed names more times than I can count. I crossed into Canada, then took a plane under a fake passport to Alaska. Middle of nowhere, population barely above zero, with nothing but mountains and silence and snow. No phones, no internet, no mail, no way for anything to find me. I built a cabin by hand, chopped wood to survive, grew a beard just to hide from myself. And for a while, it worked. The whispers faded. The nightmares dulled. The house became something distant and blurry, like a fever dream you convince yourself wasn't real. I lived alone, far beyond where people go. No one knew my name. I didn't even remember it sometimes. I told myself I had beaten it. I told myself Evelyn was gone. Then, last night, I woke up, not to a sound, but to a feeling like ice had crawled into my veins and wrapped around my heart. The fire had died, and the cabin was so cold I could see my breath in the dark. I sat up, frozen in place, because I heard it, the whisper. Soft, familiar, closer than it should have been. It said my name, like it always had. Nathan. I turned my head, slowly, my bones aching, and looked at the window. Frost had formed across the glass in jagged spider webs of white, and scrawled into it, as if dragged by an invisible finger from the inside, were two words. Found you. So, what would you do now? Seriously. I need to know. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Maybe someone out there has a way to stop her. Because I don't think I'll survive twice.